Hi everyone, well it's Roz here from Brumby Horse Life, and today's video is just about me fencing and the horses being bugs as usual. Anyway, I had a fair bit to do today, and between slopping around in the mud, trying to get my fencing up to block out the side paddock to stop the horses from getting in there, and trying to keep my pants up because my jeans got too loose for me. It was a bit chaotic, but anyway, I eventually managed to succeed one way or another. My mission for the day was to get that fencing up because, well, I don't know when we're going to run out of hay, but after speaking to my hay supplier yesterday and him indicating that there was only about 3 more big bales left, I estimate that we might get through another 2 or 3 months. And if we don't get enough rain, it's really going to be trouble. Anyway, my first job of the day was to get that fencing up, stop the horses from going into the side paddock, which is a bit of a pain because they like the extra space. But I needed to fence that off to give the grass a chance to grow. So while I did that, the horses tried to help me, of course. Both horses are extremely curious when it comes to anything that I'm trying to do, and they both want to help me, which can be a bit annoying. But I don't try and push them away because they're genuinely curious. They're not really being a bug, even though I call them that at times. They just want to be with me, and that's part of the building the bond of love and trust that I've done with them over the years. And it's important to them to spend time with me. So even if it means me doing jobs and letting them hang around, I don't mind. It's just part of owning horses and loving them. I think the hardest part for me is if I'm hammering things down and they've got their noses on my arm or they're trying to sniff what I'm trying to hammer. That can be a bit of an issue. So, as you'll notice, I have to stop, start, stop, start. But anyway, eventually I realised that they were going to get a little bit bored with what I was doing and meander around rather be right on top of me, which is where they like to be. Another reason I never chase them off, unless it's something that I might think, oh, that might be a bit dangerous, is that the horses are naturally desensitized to loud sounds, whether I'm banging things down, using the drill, hammering things, whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's the lawnmower, going, the chainsaw. The horses have become very accustomed to those noises, to those objects, and look, in terms of desensitization, it's really good for them. So that's another reason why I never chase them away. I suppose in some ways I treat my horses like other people treat their dogs. If they're out doing jobs or just generally working around the place, you find that people keep their dogs around and let them wander around and do bits and pieces with them. And I have the same philosophy with the horses. If I'm out and about doing things around the paddocks or in the yard where they can get to, it's no big deal to me if they're there. If they want me to stop for a minute and give them a bit of a love and a cuddle, I'm always happy to do that. It's just part of who we are, and I don't see it as any different as somebody who takes their dog out for a walk, or their dog is, sitting with them or walking around or checking out what they're doing. For me, it's just, horses are just bigger animals. That's all. And I think a lot of people are worried about the size of their horses, or imagine terrible scenario that the horses are going to suddenly spook and trample them or run them over. But that's not the case. Look, I've spent many years with our horses, and from day one, I taught them to be mindful of my space. And when I mean mindful of my space, is that if they're going to react, it's always away from me and not over me or towards me. If I ever get the sense that they're feeling a bit edgy, or they stop suddenly and look up, that's when I spend a little bit more time being observant as to what they're up to make sure that if they're going to flee from some unseen force, it's in the opposite direction from me. So that's where you still have to be a little bit mindful. Not that that's ever happened in my situation. Like I said, the horses are thoroughly desensitised to farm life, and they don't care whether it's a monster tractor coming past them or a truck. or a lawnmower, a whippersnipper. It's all part of the path for them, and it's just life. This is why exposure to many objects is really good for horses. You can see probably if I ever pull out the flag to wave round the horses' heads or necks or bodies, they don't
Get you
care.
to some hay,
They live
then
with
I
my
don't have to put
washing
up
near
with
them,
the
flying about in the
candy help.
wind.
It's not
They're used to
helping,
flappy things.
you know,
It's just part of daily life and their daily routine.
really.
I think probably a lot of horses live in
Yeah.
artificial sort of environments in the
Give
sense
you
that when they're in an adjustment facilities or in a
the
stable where
lettuce.
they're in confined spaces and they're not subject to daily life, I think horses become more fearful and anxious.
And you too.
And I compare that back to maybe 100
So,
years ago when horses were a part of people's
one, two,
households
it's a
and
gentleman.
had to deal with daily life with kids running around,
Yeah,
chickens and
yum,
dogs
yum, yum.
and cows and
You don't need to put it on
cars
the
and
other one. I
traffic
think it's
and
interesting.
people. You know, everyday life for them was, just full of all sorts of things that we now have to attempt to expose them to
Hey,
just so that we
how
can
about
teach them
that,
not
eh?
to spook when we get on them and go riding.
Do with my bloody
I
scissors
don't
now.
know if it's just me getting old and remembering what we call the good old days, but in my
Well,
youth
I just
with
try to keep
horses,
them
I
out the
don't
way.
think we ever had to do that
I
sort of
said,
exposure
I'm trying to
techniques that
keep
we
naughty
use
horses out
today
the
to
way.
desensitize horses because, like I said, they were very much a fabric, a part of the society
Alright,
that
well,
we
just
lived
leave me
in.
to get on with this, honey.
No, it wasn't horse and cart for everyone, but the average kid, working class kid, if they had access to a horse, didn't have access to fancy facilities. So you rode down the streets, you rode through the parks, you rode to the shops. You were constantly exposing your horse to all kinds of different scenarios. And I can't remember seeing people's horses do massive spooks. Yeah, horses did bolt and did the occasional crazy thing or crazy stunt. But it was a different era where horses were still very much a part of people's families. And I suppose that's the reason why I think that horses back then were seen as maybe more stable or more calm. I think it was just simply they were exposed from a young age to family life. I think it's the same, really, even if you look at kids today versus my kids growing up. When my kids were growing up, there was still a fair amount of freedom, and kids walked to school, played in the parks, went down the road to their mate's place. There was a greater sense of community, I think, and just independence. And we didn't worry. I don't think I worried as much as I see, unfortunately, parents and people have to do today because there's just so many predators out there. But I think the same things happen with horses in a sense. Back in the day, half the things that we worry about now, I'd never even heard of. And yet we had horses that, were healthy, well looked after, lived long lives, didn't appear to have anything majorly wrong with them. And we didn't see all these catastrophic type behaviours where, human to horse interaction seems to be an abnormality rather than a norm. And so I've got the philosophy that if you treat your horses without fear, without anxiety, as part of your family, and or like your pet dog or like your cat, realize they've got their own personality and their own quirks, and deal with it. No big deal. You don't have to run off to a trainer to resolve every little issue. And who knows, the issue might be you and not the horse. And so that's how I tend to look at horses and my ownership around horses and training horses. I still think the number one thing is to be safe, have common sense around your horses, don't take unnecessary risks, know who your horse's personality is. In the case of Billy and Bella, Bill's an extrovert in the sense that he's always out there and in your face and likes to perform. Bella is an introvert, but she does have that performance side to her. If you've seen her in some of her battles that she does with Billy, she's much more of a sensitive flower. He's a jealous boy. And so I've got to know their personalities, and I don't make huge judgment calls on their personalities because, like all of us, they have their good days and their bad days, and so do I. Sometimes I think we've just forgotten to how to be normal around horses. And blame the internet in some ways, even though here I am using the internet and having a YouTube channel. But really, I think what I want to say to people is act normally around your horses and feel normal with your horses. I read so many anxiety filled posts and see things that should be easy and common sense to do around your horses. It becomes difficult because I think that there's been so much um, promotion on problems with horses that's become a norm rather than what normal behavior really looks like with horses. And so, in my channel, what I want to do is to try and show people what daily life with horses is all about. It's not always about that special training moment or that, rah rah, look how wonderful my horse is. It's about this is my life. This is what daily living with horses about. Some days my horses are really well behaved, some days they're not. Some days I'm on my best performance, some days I'm not. It's called daily life and living, not about trying to be the expert or Miss Perfect or the most wonderful horses in the world. It's about being realistic and saying, these are my challenges today, or this is the jobs I've got to do, these are my horses. And you can have balanced and happy horses too if you just follow a simple lifestyle, simple methods. Build up your love and trust with your horses, and you'll be surprised at how far just building a bond of trust and communication with your horse will go. So, for those of you who haven't watched my channel before, Billy is an Australian Brumby. He was born in the wild. He was starved and abused and rescued by myself and Kel. And Bella was a largely unhandled quarter horse mare that I got from her breeders. So both of them had their own issues, and mainly it was being unhandled. In Bill's case, it was being abused and starved, and he was terribly shut down. In Bella's, it was just simply she was very big, very reactive, and relatively unhandled. So that journey began for me with both of them 5 years ago. And the horses that you see today are very calm, relaxed horses that want to interact with me. And look, in the beginning, if you've read or if you've watched any of my other videos, I started out legally blind and, I had cataracts, I can see now. And of course, I'm always out there doing jobs. But I spent a lot of time just trust building and communing with the horses. So you don't need to be an expert or a master handler to achieve a trust and a bond with your horse. And I can tell you that just by being a calm presence around your horses, they will respond and they like to spend time with you. And during that time period, like you would teach your dog or your cat or your children how to behave and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable without, having a huge drama each time. That's how I've been with my horses. So if I don't like something, I make it clear to them. I don't rush out to try and whack them or try and control them or chase them backwards around the paddock. I do simple, firm commands, and I do a lot of hand signals. The horses understand a lot of verbal commands these days, and they respond to it, and it makes life very simple and very easy with the horses. So try not to overthink and complicate your relationship with your horse because usually that sort of problematic behaviours that come out of your horse is the result of you yourself. A lot of us are not aware of our own body language. We're not aware of our own tones of voice, or our automated reactions. And because if we don't have that self awareness of how we present ourselves to the horses, it's very easy to assume every time your horse is behaving in a way that you don't like that it must be something wrong with a horse. Well, in my own experience, I think it's more likely to be that the owner or the handler of the horse has caused or created the problem in the first place and has done it not knowingly. And that's why they end up having to see a trainer who works more on the person than they ever do on the horse. Usually they've bored the horse to death in the first 15 minutes when they've talked endlessly to the hapless owner or handler. And usually that's just to lecture them over or find what faults that the owner has. And you can see that in just about every video you watch. Just those sessions of getting control with the lead and making your horse do circles and lunge round, and stay in control doesn't really resolve all the other underlying issues that have caused the problematic horse in the first place. If you're having problems with your horse, go back to the beginning and work out not just where the horse went wrong, but where did you go wrong? We need to be able to self reflect in our relationships with our horses, because if we don't, we're never going to achieve anything that we want with that horse. So we need to look at ourselves, look at the way we interact with our horses, and what preconceived ideas we have with our horses, and how those preconceived ideas may distort our relationship with our horses. So there's a lot to think about in this video. I know I've talked on a number of subjects, but it's a work day and a lot of things go on in my mind when it comes to handling horses, safe practice around horses, building a trust, a relationship up, and just generally having a friendship with your horses. Well, if you like our channel, please subscribe, hit the like button, and stay tuned for another video.